Alright, so today we're going to finish up the Roaring Twenties and move into the Great Depression. About the Ku Klux Klan, its rise and fall in the 20s, Scopes monkey trial, presidency of Herbert Hoover in the Great Depression, the Bonus March, Franklin D. Roosevelt and the New Deal, such things as the Glass-Steagall Act, the National Recovery Administration, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, and the Civilian Conservation Corps. So, any questions on those? Well, you can't talk about the violence and reactionary tone of the 1920s, especially with race relations, without discussing the Ku Klux Klan. Now, in the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan rose again from the ashes of its Reconstruction past. So the Ku Klux Klan is a terrorist organization. Another way to describe it. It's built on intimidation, corruption, assault, and murder. Now, why in the 1920s people suddenly get involved in the Ku Klux Klan? Remember, race relations have never been a priority. Now they're just getting worse. Klansmen feared that America was in decline somehow and embarked on a self-styled crusade where they saw as rescuing America's morality and heritage. Preached anti-Catholicism, anti-civil rights for minorities, it's anti-immigrant, anti-alcohol, countless other antis. They're anti-everything. In its wake, countless African Americans and outspoken opponents of Klans were lynched or threatened or harassed in some way, particularly in the South. And more than anything else, as a reaction to the vast changes taking place in American society, as small-town America and rural lifestyle being replaced by the fast pace of the city. Estimated by 1923, it had as many as 3 million members. Just an estimate. Some of the records are kept secret. Some of the records are forged. Records weren't kept very well. A lot of Klan officials padded the books, stealing Klan dues. By 1925, its membership may have been as high as 8 million. And that's not counting the number of people who were sympathetic to their cause, that is, believed in what the Klan was doing. But this time, the Klan just wasn't in the South trying to fight Reconstruction, trying to turn the clock back to 1860, trying to re-enslave millions of African Americans. Instead, they've gone nationwide this time, all over the country. In fact, there are more Klan members in Michigan than there were in Mississippi. And the Klan went wherever the power was, trying to establish themselves as a political power in their own right. In Arkansas, the Klan went as far as to hold its own primary to see who the Klan candidate would be in the Democratic primary, which was the only political party in Arkansas at that time. But, I'd say they went where the power was. In the South, still one party region, they went to the Democratic Party. In the North, they went to the Republican Party. For example, in Indiana in the 1920s, they controlled the Ku Klux Klan controlled the Republican Party in Indiana. 1924, the Klan elected several congressmen, legislators, and the governor that year. Well, in 1925, the leader of the Indiana Klan raped and murdered a legislative secretary and was quickly apprehended for the crime. Before the woman died, she identified the leader of the Indiana Klan as her attacker. But all along the way, the guy kept saying he'd never spend a day in jail because of all his political connections, but he ended up going to jail. And demanded, once he went to jail, demanded the governor either pardon him or he'd released the information on absolutely everything the Klan had done to steal the 1924 election. Well, the governor wouldn't give in. So, after a refusal to pardon him, this disgraced Klan leader opens the books and talks about bribes, kickbacks, stuffed ballot boxes all over the state. As a result, several congressmen and several legislators ended up going to jail. The governor barely escaped indictment. The guy still spent the rest of his life in jail. In Oklahoma, the Klan elected a U.S. senator and took control of the state legislature in 1922. They also elected the governor of Georgia that year. In Texas, they elected a U.S. senator in 1922. That was defeated in 1928. Now in Texas, the Klan and the regular Democratic organization fought vicious battles back and forth. Similar to what's happening in Arkansas. Dallas, in particular, the hotbed of Klan activities. The leader of the Klan in Texas was a dentist in Dallas. You can see the strong reactionary strain in Dallas politics well into the 1950s and 1960s. Now, I'll give you an example here, the 1924 election in Texas. The Democratic primary featured the candidate of the Ku Klux Klan and a woman named Ma Ferguson. Her name was Miriam, but everyone just called her Ma. So her husband had been governor of Texas a few years before and been impeached on a number of charges. But Ma's running now. And Ferguson, although conservative herself, she seemed to kind of embody traditional values and ideas about America. An organization made the election, choice went to call a bonnet and the hood. The traditional bonnets that women wore before that time, and Klansman's hood. Ferguson ended up winning the election. But the Klan was on the march everywhere. Millions of members marched on Washington, D.C. Actually, several newspapers, mostly in the North, tried to run exposés trying to detail the violence of the Klan. Lynchings, race riots incited by the Klan. Murders that would never be prosecuted but conducted by the Klan. But for all their veiled threats and immense power, what destroyed them, tragically, was not the violence against African Americans. It was corruption and scandals like the one in Indiana. And its political influence vanished almost quickly as it arose. By the end of the 1920s, the Klan was only a fringe movement, but would arise again in the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s. Today in the United States, there are hate groups in almost every state. Like I said, the Klan had a very active organization here in Union County for many years. I had a student a few years ago said she could see the Klan's burning crosses not far from her house. Scared because she had mixed-race kids. Like I said, the problem wasn't just the Klan, it was those who agreed to the Klan and secretly encouraged them. But the thing about that kind of hate is, whether they're wearing a Klansman's hood or a Nazi uniform or a three-piece business suit, hate is the same. Eventually it feeds on itself and destroys itself. History shows that such fanaticism and hatred ultimately destroys everything in its path, as any and all means are used to pursue their ends, even if it means in their own downfall. In the end, they do destroy themselves, but they take a lot of innocent people with them. Hitler, the Klan, and other villains from history are perfect examples of this. Of course, the answer to that in the 1920s, as well as today, and any other time in history, is more than just speaking out against that, against the little sides, against the little jokes, the comments. Like I said, there's a joke in the white community. You know, every racist joke starts. Look and see no one's watching. Remember, your conscience is always watching. Okay, not also look forward on the outside on others. You think yourself as well. Now we get to the Scopes monkey trawl. One of the more curious episodes in the 1920s. Since probably the most famous attack on urban culture of the decade. It has to do with the theories of Charles Darwin. In 1859, he published a book on what he called The Theory of Evolution by Natural Selection. Published it under pressure from his friends after conducted years of research on the subject, and he learned that a bunch of other scientists about to publish the same theory. Now remember, in science what a theory is. It's a proposed explanation for something that's been observed in nature. So scientific theory isn't a guess that something's going to happen. It's trying to explain why is this thing happening. Something you've already seen. Now, the theory says is that certain traits are passed down from one generation to the next. And if certain traits ensure survival to the next generation, then those traits are most likely to be passed down if that species is to survive. For example, suppose you have a species of birds on some isolated area. All of a sudden, a couple, just for some random reason, said Darwin didn't propose a vehicle for why this happened. The theory of genetics wouldn't come on for many years. But random mutation comes along, and suddenly couple members of the species of bird suddenly have different colored plumage. They start blending into the background all of a sudden. Well, under ordinary circumstances, that wouldn't mean much, just be a curiosity. But suppose a new predator is introduced to the environment. Like I said, the more brightly colored birds are usually picked off. The ones that survive to reproduce the next generation are the ones with the mutation, the ones that blended into the background. And so they're the ones who pass their genes down to the next generation. And before long, the only members of that species are the ones that the plumage that blends into the background. You see it in other examples, other species. Ability to run faster, go longer without food, or water. Sometimes immunity to certain disease. And scientists are seeing this everywhere. Saw it in particular breeding certain types of animals, such as pigeon breeding, which is very popular among the upper class in England at this time period. Breeding of dogs for certain characteristics. Now remember, dogs are all descended from wolves. Like I said, they're all descended from the same species, but certain characteristics were bred into certain varieties over many generations, over many centuries. Some were designed for hunting larger animals, some designed for hunting smaller animals. For example, poodles, they're bred to hunt rats. And so you have these very many different varieties of dogs bred for very specific things. Like I said, doctors see it in medicine all the time. So you nursing students or science students, why are certain antibiotics that have been so useful for so many years suddenly unable to, don't work anymore? Answer, evolution. So what happened was the bacteria that these antibiotics were attacking, the antibiotics didn't quite kill all of them. There are a couple that survived for some reason. And so as a result, the only members of that species to survive and produce the next generation were the ones with that immunity to that antibiotic. And before long, in a few generations, the only members of that species that exist are the ones with that immunity to that antibiotic. That's why we have these antibiotic-resistant staph infections and so forth. That's why they don't prescribe penicillin much anymore, because everything's adapted to it. So that was Darwin, but he went even further and caused a huge controversy, and he said that human beings are not immune to the forces of evolution. We evolved too over many successive generations. And that really unnerved a lot of people. The idea that human beings really are just nothing more than animals tempered by a few centuries of civilization. But human beings, so we are biological creatures. Certain traits are passed down from one generation to the next. I'll ask you a question. How many of you ever had to have a wisdom tooth removed? Yeah, wisdom teeth. Answer, why? Evolution. For many successive generations, human diet has changed. Not as heavily dependent on meat, so the jaws started getting smaller. In fact, too small to hold wisdom teeth. The appendix. In the human body, it does nothing. But in some animals, like say rabbits and so forth, it's a vital organ. Because our digestive system has evolved over many generations. Of course, generations, you're talking about 20 years in a human being, but bacteria or something, you're talking about maybe a matter of hours between generations. And so that idea that human beings were affected by evolution, that unnerved a lot of people, especially a lot of Christian fundamentalists who believe that in the literal creation of Genesis, the earth was created in 6 days and man was just created in present form just like that. Now, most denominations today see no contradiction between the Bible and evolution or any other type of scientific concept. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, a lot of people did. So state after state started passing laws banning the teaching of evolution. They're so unnerved by scientific concept they had to say it cannot be taught. The state of Tennessee happened to be one of those. Say Texas, Arkansas, among many others. So it comes down to 1925. You have a man named John Scopes come along in the city of Dayton, Tennessee. Well, in Dayton, Tennessee, like I said, they're worried about the image of Tennessee being portrayed as hopelessly backwards. Want to see it as open, progressive, ready to attract business and industry from the north. Kind of skilled labor force, educated population that could support large factories and large industry. So they saw the biggest impediment to that as the teaching of the law banning the teaching of the theory of evolution. Essentially, made Tennessee look like they were not going to teach their kids science no matter what. Next, and business leaders would not simply just not be impressed by people standing in the way of education and progress based on a very narrow interpretation of the Bible versus scientific evidence. Because all the science supported evolution. Still does to this day, 150 years later. Like I said, it is a bedrock, fundamental principle of science. Like I say, it is as fundamental to our world as flipping on that switch, turning on that light. It is a fact. Creatures evolve over successive generations. That's the way the world works. So, business leaders in Dayton are deciding they're going to challenge the law and hope to try to have it overturned in court. Because they can't overturn it in the legislature, so they'll go to courts to do it. So look at John Scopes. Actually was a substitute teacher in Tennessee. He goes in, teaches a couple of lessons on evolution, and the chaos lies. That's an uproar in the town. He's arrested for teaching evolution. And prosecutors decide they're going to make an example of John Scopes. So what ends up happening is the trial ends up becoming a spectacle, is that pitted two giants of the day against each other. Well, the business leaders who had gotten Scopes to do this, they pulled together their money and they hired the most famous lawyer in the country at the time, a trial lawyer named Clarence Darrow. So Darrow was his own dream team rolled into one. Flashy, clever, grabbed the headlines, great legal mind. And so Darrow accepted the challenge to go in there and try to tear this law down. Well, the prosecution decides to bring in its own celebrity, William Jennings Bryan, who was a lawyer, also a champion of progressive rural values since the 1890s. So Bryan was a devout Christian. A lot of his political rallies had this kind of revival-like feel. Darrow was an atheist, but he had defended a lot of high-profile cases. So he had these two great personalities coming, and people are flooding in from all over the country, newspapers and so forth, just to see these two in action. So, two clashed for days on different points of law. Finally frustrated, Darrow puts Bryan on the stand as an expert on the Bible. So Bryan didn't have to take the stand, besides he's going to defend the Bible. And Darrow tears him apart on the stand. So it makes him look ridiculous. And but Scopes, nevertheless, is found guilty and fined $50. Yeah. That's it. 1920s, that's a lot of money. Well, the fine was never paid, and exhausted Bryan died 3 days after the trial. Yeah, basically it did. Just a lot of stress. As for Scopes, he ended up getting a job at the Natural History Museum in Chicago. Had a very good career there for many years. So Darrow went on to continue being a trial lawyer. called the monkey trial because of a common misunderstanding about evolution. Some people don't quite understand evolution, believe that human beings evolved from monkeys. That's not what happened. Human beings and monkeys are both primates. We both had a common ancestor millions of years ago, but we did not evolve from monkeys. That was called the monkey trial. Now, the monkey trial didn't settle the issue of evolution or fundamentalism, but merely marked the divide between city life and rural life. Scientific research into evolution continued, produced a lot of breakthroughs in genetics and understanding ecology. But it's such a fascinating trial, so many fascinating ideas, that by the end of 1925, it was turned into a play and performed on Broadway, a play called Inherit the Wind. It's had several different movie versions of it. This is the longest running play in Broadway history. Yeah, it says based on this right here. Like I say, several movie versions of it made. Because a lot of the people involved in the trial are still alive, they had to change names of the city, the main characters. William Jennings Bryan becomes Matthew Harrison Brady, and so forth. And now I move to 1928. Well, in 1928, Coolidge decided not to seek another term in office. A simple one-sentence statement, he said, I choose not to run in 1928. I say it's so quiet, such an understated person, that when Calvin Coolidge died in the early 1930s, one wit replied, how could they tell? So, the Democrats ended up going with New York Governor Al Smith. He was very popular in New York. He's born on the Lower East Side, German-Irish ancestry. He represented the growing power of the Democratic Party in the cities. Now, Smith opposed Prohibition, which was still very popular in the late 1920s, in spite of all the gang violence associated with it. And he was Roman Catholic. So basically he's had two strikes against him already. It's a nation that's devoutly Protestants, overwhelmingly Protestants. Well, Smith still needed to prove that he could unite the South, the West with the East, but his distinctive Brooklyn accent didn't play well outside of New York. Reporters once asked him about his appeal in states west of the Mississippi. Smith replied, what states are west of the Mississippi? So his wet and Catholic ideology led him to lose traditionally Democratic states such as Texas, Florida, and Oklahoma. In fact, Oklahoma is going Republican for the first time ever. But Republicans go with Herbert Hoover. Now, Hoover built a great reputation for himself as a humanitarian. He helped organize food production for the U.S. during World War I, what's called the Food Will Win the War campaigns, and organized food relief for the war-torn populations of Europe after the war. So it's a very impressive record. He had spent most of the Coolidge administration as Secretary of Commerce, and so Hoover's nominated quite easily. But the campaign was very vicious against Smith. They had a Protestant minister going across the country say Catholics weren't really Christian, even though the Roman Catholic Church is the oldest organized denomination in Christianity. They said, you vote for Smith, your Pope's going to end up running America. So not understanding the role the Pope plays in the life of Catholics. Basically doing whatever they could to just tear him down because he was Roman Catholic. Like I said, as governor, he'd been a very solid, a very effective governor. But essentially, his opponents were saying that Catholics weren't good enough to be president or governor or anything. Especially difficult as a running mate, Senator Joseph T. Robinson of Arkansas. Robinson was a popular senator. He chaired the 1924 Democratic Convention and was almost nominated himself, but 1928 he's nominated for vice president. The first Arkansan that ever put on a national ticket, although as vice president. Bill Clinton would be the next Arkansan put on a party on a national ticket as president in 1992. But basically, it's because of Robinson and Governor and Huey Long in Louisiana is the only reason that Arkansas and Louisiana even voted with the Democratic Party that year. In fact, the only states west of the Mississippi River that actually voted for Smith. But Robinson had to sit there in his church on Sundays in Little Rock and have the preacher tell him that if you vote for Smith, you're going to hell. That'd be very comfortable for him. Excuse me. Allergies. But Hoover ended up winning easily. He gets 58.2% of the vote, 444 electoral votes, 40.9% for Smith, 87 electoral votes. Goes to Hoover. When he starts in office, he's a very popular figure. His hands-off political leadership style destroyed people's confidence in him as the Great Depression emerged and ransacked the nation, and also led to the mass defection of African Americans from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. Let's talk about the Great Depression here for a minute. Income tax cuts in the 1920s reduced the number of people paying income taxes from about 6.5 million to 4 million. Even though the United States is still paying off the debt from World War I. But most of these cuts went to the wealthy. Because the richest Americans suddenly they aren't paying any income tax. Well, you have a lot of middle income earners who are paying it. In fact, in the midst of the Great Depression, the public was shocked to learn that J.P. Morgan, his 19 partners in the J.P. Morgan Bank, easily some of the richest men in the country, paid no taxes at all in 1930, 1931, or 1932. Now, it's hard to understate the effect the Great Depression had on the country. So never before and never since do you see such widespread privation, poverty, and desperation in the United States. Like I said, Depression, for the first time you see starvation in the streets of America. People literally were starving to death. So people were terrified. So the pressure of the Depression in some countries so much that their governments collapsed. The same thing nearly happened in the United States. Here's what starts it off. On October 24th, 1929, the bottom dropped out of the stock market, heralding the beginning of the Great Depression. Now, the market, which hit its height, had suffered some sharp losses in previous trading sessions. But on this day, a Black Thursday, October 24th, bottom fell out as a record 12.9 million shares were traded, more than the entire previous week. So now today, 12.9 million shares are traded in an hour. It's no big deal, but that was very, very significant at that time. It's basically a total panic on the market. 5 days later, market crashed again on Tuesday, October 29th, with 16 million stocks sold, and the stock average dropping 49 points. In fact, stock average went from a high of 452 in September 1929, its height. It's the combined average of the different stock prices in key industries. Like I said, it's like 17,000 today. But it's only 452 at this point. Well, the time that bottoms out in July of 1932, stock average is down to 52. Basically, it lost 90% of its value in 3 years. I mean, like today's stock market average going from 17,000 down to 1,700. Billions of dollars just evaporate. Money that just existed on paper, just in theory. Now, what happened was stocks have been trading ridiculously high levels for some time. Until about 1927, stock prices generally rose with the profits of the company. But after 1927, a mania of speculation sent stocks to dizzying heights. Give you an example here. RCA, a popular stock at the time, Radio Corporation of America. Made a bunch of money selling records and record players and radios. Well, their stock went from about $100 a share in March 1928 to $500 by September 1929, in the height of the market. Now here's the question. Was RCA suddenly doing 5 times as much business or making 5 times as much profit? No. They announced some new line of products that was going to be making them a bunch more money? No. It was trading 5 times higher because people were willing to pay that much for it. There was no real basis for the price to be that high. Well, after the crash, stock prices were cut in half, at about $250 a share. You see, there had been serious problems in the economy up to this point, but the crash after the Great Depression, the economy fell apart right around the crash. Basically, it's just the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, despite the surge in stock prices, real problems existed in the economy. People at this point kind of saying the stock market is something of a barometer for the economy. That it was doing what? That if stock prices were going up, the economy must be doing well. Well, it really wasn't the case. Now, the steady expansion and sale of consumer goods had saturated the economy by this point. Everyone had bought cars, radios, and appliances, and didn't need any more. But they bought them on credit. Overextension of credit debt. Sound familiar? Well, here's the thing. Herbert Hoover comes into office promising chicken in every pot, 2 cars in every garage, basically, new age of prosperity. But Ford or GM or Dodge, they keep cranking out cars. Everyone has 2 cars in their garage. How many more do they need? How many radios do they need? This is time when radios are furniture. They're this big, bulky contraption you stick in the corner. So, companies couldn't sell anymore. So prices dropped, try to meet consumer demand. What ends up happening, though, is the market's saturated, they can't sell anymore, so they have to start cutting production. Which means they don't need all those men working on the assembly line and the factory, so they're laid off. Which means all of a sudden these guys, they don't have the money anymore to make payments on all the products they've bought. So they have to, so all this stuff is repoed. Companies start lowering prices to try to get more people to buy it, but as more companies are shutting down and laying people off, so no one can afford it. So you have to start having this snowball effect. Prices dropping more and more of these products being repoed, and it's to the point the company can't even give this stuff away. So what's happening is deflation. This time not just in agricultural processes, that is happening everywhere in the economy. Except prices dropping is a good thing, not a bad thing for consumers, but here's the problem is more and more, who has a job to even pay for it? I mean, they can't even give this stuff away. So I guess the point, prices are dropping so low the companies can't meet their own obligations, they're in debt and ain't going bankrupt, and everybody who hasn't been laid off is laid off. It goes into bankruptcy because it shuts down. So in 1927, the economy kind of stalled as the national economy began to reach the saturation point. The nation quickly rebounded, but still had the same problem of limited purchasing power of the American people. Now, corporate leaders could have responded to this by raising wages or lowering prices, but did neither one. The Federal Reserve instead lowered interest rates to stimulate the flow of cash in the economy. But instead of new investments in housing and factories, the excess cash went to the stock market. Or borrowing money to buy stock. The nation continued on its spending spree in the late 1920s, urged on by installment plans. The production figures were falling by 1928. Consumer debt was rising. Now, only about 3 million people owned stock in 1929. Only about 500,000 are active buyers and sellers. Surge in stock prices had become something of a national obsession with the rise in stock values, steady assurance of the strength of the economy. Back between 1925 and 1929, the value of stocks went from $40 billion to $67 billion. These people putting all their money into stocks. Many of them. So here's what's ended up happening is people start buying stocks on margin. Margin buying is strictly regulated today, but it was openly, widely encouraged back then. So basically, you're buying a piece of stock on an installment plan. Remember, normally people buy stock, they're not buying just one share. Example, got company A here, stock selling at $100. So you buy 10 shares at $10 a piece. And your margin buy. So here's what happens. Stock at $100 means you still owe $90 on that stock, per stock. Which means this stock here, just for an example, has to go from $100 up to $190 just to break even. Stock really has to double in value just for you to even break even. And of course, stock keeps rising and rising and rising. It gets to the point that who's going to buy it? They start realizing stock is overvalued. So you get what we call the theory of the next greatest fool, which is a person who's going to buy it for $191. When it's overvalued at $190, it's the next greatest fool. And whoever's going to make profit off that bought it at the next level, $191, the next greatest fool after that. But what happens instead, if the stock crashes, goes down to, say, 25 or something, not only are you on the hook for the $75 per stock you lost, but also the $90 per share that you still owe. You're wiped out. So, what I'm happening is a lot of corporations were encouraging banks and brokerage houses to get people to buy stock on margin. They were loaning money to investors to buy their own stock. In fact, 1929, Standard Oil was loaning $69 million per day to brokerage firms just to get people to buy Standard Oil stock. Banks are openly loaning people money to buy stock. And so when the crash comes in 1929, Value of the nation's stock portfolio drops $15 billion. Stock market. All these losses on those 2 days in 1929 lost $15 billion across the country. And so you had businesses trying to pour money into the stock market those days, trying to stem the losses, but it's just going down the drain. This $15 billion was 14% of the gross national product of the United States. By just over $100 billion at that point. Essentially, $1 every 7 disappeared. Basically, it'd be like the United States is $1.5 trillion just disappeared overnight. Massive contraction of the economy. Like I said, with stock prices dropping like this, the stock market did not reach pre-crash levels until 1953. 20 years later. Now, Hoover tried to console the nation, saying the economy is still fundamentally sound, but this just wasn't true. Purchasing power of most Americans on the decline. Business concentrated too much on profit-taking by holding down wages. That's concentrating more wealth in the hands of a few rather than spreading it out. It is, if you have an economy based on consumer spending, when consumer spending is restricted, you're restricting your ability to sell products. If you have more and more money being concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer people, you've got a very basic problem. Now you're a millionaire, but how many cars do you really need? How many cars are you really going to buy? How many refrigerators do you need? How many vacuum cleaners do you need? How many trips to the doctor do you need? So at this point, about a third of the nation's personal income went to about 5% of the people. They're the ones having all the money, and the ones having to do all the spending for the economy. Again, the rich had the money to buy these products. They only needed a few. So the economy steadily disintegrated as factories had too many goods to sell and didn't need to produce anymore. More factory workers laid off. But fewer sales. Businesses start closing. More people laid off. Snowball effect. By 1932, unemployment had reached 25% in the United States. That's not counting the number of people who are underemployed, working only part-time or whatever they could find. Or people working at very reduced wages in different industries where they had been. 25% unemployment. Steel production was down to 12% of capacity. Personal incomes down by half. Because those who were working are making very little. Auto production ground almost to a halt. Take, for example, the case of Toledo, Ohio. They've been a thriving industrial city. They made a lot of parts for cars used by the auto manufacturers in Detroit, which wasn't too far away. Auto production stops. No one's buying any Toledo's products. Toledo, Ohio, during the Depression, 80% unemployment. Completely disintegrated. Gross national product down a third. People are starving to death. In Detroit, Michigan, People are starving to death at the rate of 1 every 7 hours. They're finding bodies, entire families underneath the bridges and the overpasses, starving to death. Said charities couldn't do anything because no one had any money to give to charity. It says before the government was even doing anything about it. So, farms devastated by another period of inflation. And as the crisis deepened and Hoover refused to do anything about it, so, well, the private economy is going to fix itself. Hoover caught the blame. Camps of homeless becoming called Hoovervilles. Newspapers, people using cover themselves on the blankets, on the park benches called Hoover blankets. They were blamed for it all because he wouldn't do anything. They talk about what the economy needs to do to fix itself, that private industry is going to fix itself, meant nothing when your families went hungry that night. So at that point, we've got to stop for now. Depression is starting. They're basically doing everything he can to alienate the entire country. His presidency collapses. So we'll see what happens with Franklin Roosevelt next time. Read your book, chapters 28, 29. We'll see you all after a while.